I know exactly who's going to start opposite of Arnold Ebiketie.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Aaron Freeman and Tori McElhaney. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Now that the playoffs are a wrap, sports has stopped sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. The Atlanta Football Party is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Falcons are on break until July 24th, but we're still here. So we'll talk about a breakout player on both sides of the ball in the deep dive. And the Falcons are still middling, according to one list. But first, let's take a look at who we project to be starters come week one. So, Tori, we are exactly 10 Sundays away from the start of the 2024 season. And although training camp is about 3 weeks away, where some of the decisions will ultimately be made, you likely have an idea of how certain position battles will play out for the Falcons. So for you, if the season started today, who would be your projected starters? We're going to take three positions, but let's start with edge rusher. Who would be your projected starters?
Yeah, I think obviously AK, Lorenzo Carter probably as well. I think those two are kind of the ones that I feel like I just know the most about and could really, see. The thing is like when it comes to the front, like the defensive front, sometimes like starters to me are like not as big of a deal as like who gets the most reps over the course of a game and like who plays the biggest chunk of percentages of the snaps. But those are the two guys that I feel like obviously we know the most about. They've kind of established themselves. And I know for me personally, like I do want to see Arnold Ebiketie really like step into his own this year. I think this is a year that could really be, you hope if you're the Falcons, something special for him because he has kind of had that time to develop. And yes, it's a new scheme. And yes, it's been a new scheme almost every single year that he's been here. But also at the exact same time, you could kind of flip that on its head and take that as a positive where you've seen a lot of things, you've gotten a lot of knowledge. So like now really hone in to what you can do well and go out and perform. So those are the guys that I think if like I'm just throwing two guys out there, those are the two I'm going to throw out there.
And Aaron, I'll be an amenable host and expand the definition to what Tori said. So in addition to who as of today you would project as starters at edge rusher, who would you also look to see maybe getting the majority of the snaps?
Yeah, I would agree with Tori that it's probably Arnold Ebiketie and Lorenzo Carter, but I think the player to watch is Braylon Trice. Obviously, the Falcons drafted him relatively high in the third round and, hope to see him as a sort of fixture as part of their pass rush in years to come. I don't think they're going to rush him out on the field and, ask him to come in and play 50-plus snaps right away in week one. I don't think that's probably their plan, but, plans change. And if he comes in and balls out during training camp, then, they might be like, okay, well, let's see what this young guy can do. So I think he's probably the player to watch. But in all likelihood, we'll probably see at least early in the season, Lorenzo Carter and Arnold Ebiketie get the majority of those snaps. And we'll see, if Trice and D'Angelo Malone and some of the other young players can get worked into the lineup over the course of the season.
Jarvis, are we going to make it 3 for 3?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because when you think about, the veteran on their squad and Arnold Ebiketie and being a second round pick and that draft equity that they put into him. And like Tori mentioned, he's gotten a lot of reps and you saw him gradually improve, over the course of the years. Now, granted, is it what people expect from a second round player? Not necessarily, right? But I think from an individual standpoint, you've seen the growth and you've seen the development from AK. So you can kind of bet on him being that guy that on third down long, he's going to be in there and he's going to be on those early downs as well. As far as Lorenzo Carter goes, I feel like he's a placeholder. He'll be a placeholder in that spot because I think Braden Trice, just from my personal belief, what I've seen from him, I feel like he'll play his way to get into not necessarily a starter, but he's going to get a lot of reps once he starts getting that a feel for the professional game versus college, right? When you're making that jump, obviously it's always going to be an adjustment. So I feel like Trice will be the guy that eventually plays his way into getting a lot of pass rush snaps, if that makes sense, versus Lorenzo, who is a guy who I would prefer to have in there on the early downs, on those run downs, because I feel like he's been pretty solid in the run game. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it.
And for you, Jarvis, what about at wide receiver 3? I think we know we have maybe 1 and 2 that might be solidified, but what about that third spot?
I think Rondale Moore has a really good opportunity to be something, right? When you talk about being a second-round pick out of Purdue, with Arizona, he had a lot of high expectations for, coming out of college. And you think about the breakaway speed and then pairing that with a guy who is probably one of the better deep ball throwers in the NFL, and Kirk Cousins. I think you think that it's going to be some type of a jump when you pair him with that guy. I think back in 2016 when Taylor Gabriel came on the scene for the Falcons, and being in that second year in Kyle Shanahan's offense, I feel like that can be something we can see, something very similar, right? Not necessarily to be here long term for the Falcons, but hey, he can go get paid somewhere else like Taylor did. So I think that this is a huge opportunity for Rondale Moore to be able to go ahead and make some money, because he, like you said, he came in with the expectations, didn't necessarily live up to them. Now he has an opportunity to kind of get it right.
I think too, like, you got to throw Ray McCloud in there as well. Like, I think it's obviously that for that maybe like slot position, you're looking more at like Ray or Rondale. And I think you could kind of toss them up either way and feel pretty good about it, because I think that was something that was really intriguing when they did go out and get Ray and they did go out and get Rondale. Is like, these were two guys who had similar type of not just builds, but also speed, and also kind of what they did. Both of them have had a little bit of success in the return game as well, if you're looking on special teams and not even looking at what they've done offensively at the previous spots. But like, those are two guys that I think it's really going to be interesting to see what the Falcons do with them. If we're kind of talking where it's like, okay, we know Drake's going to be on the field and we know that Darnell Mooney's going to be on the field. It's like, who's that third guy? Who's that slot guy? Either one, I think you can throw out there and feel pretty confident in. What I'm going to be interested in is like when both of them are on the field together, and it's, Drake and Kyle and Ray and Rondale, and you kind of have this like very different packaging of looks in your receiving weapons, where you have Drake and Kyle, who are these huge targets. Then you have Rondale and Ray that are these like quick and speedy guys. I think it kind of really makes it difficult for a secondary to figure out what exactly they want to do with that group, if it were to be like those four specifically. So yeah, I mean, you have to throw in Ray just to have a little bit of fun too.
I'll throw in KhaDarel Hodge too.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, why not? Yeah.
I guess I think everybody nailed it with sort of what they're looking at. Rondale, this big year, contract year. Ray, a player that is familiar with Ike Hilliard. KhaDarel Hodge is kind of familiar with this coaching staff. I can't remember. I want to say one of the offensive assistants was his position coach in college at Prairie View. He also played in the Rams offense way back in 2018 and only had 2 catches. But there is some familiarity with this offense from, 5 years ago under Sean McVay and whatnot. And, he's always been a productive player when he's gotten opportunities on the field. So I think the Falcons, whoever emerges as that number 3 wide receiver, will have plenty of opportunities, as Tori and Jarvis have talked about, to either earn big bucks or to make impactful plays, sort of as that guy that is probably the forgotten man when you think about this Falcons offense, where defenses are focusing on Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Darnell Mooney potentially and Bijan Robinson. And then that gives whoever that third wide receiver is an opportunity to, make some plays just because everybody's like, oh yeah, we forgot about Rondale Moore. We forgot about KhaDarel Hodge, or we forgot about Ray McCloud. Oh, those guys can make some plays. So I think whoever emerges, this summer through training camp And throughout the season, I think we'll have a golden opportunity to be an impactful player, even if it's not necessarily because they're getting the biggest volume of targets going their way.
Yeah, I think the training camp is going to be so important, right? Especially for you talking about throw this guy in here in this slot, right? KhaDarel, Hodge, Rondale Moore, and Ray McCloud, because there's going to be some adjustment period, coming into, for Zach Robinson as the first year as being play caller, right? We gotta account for that. We can't overlook that. But I think that having a guy like Kirk Cousins, who's been in this system and familiar with the verbiage, and he's going to have I feel like he's going to have a lot of input on what's being called on a weekly basis each Sundays. And Zach even talking about that, how it's going to help him, so I feel like there's going to be adjustment period. So that's why I feel like it's a prime opportunity for either one of these guys to step in here, because ain't nobody really got no real, hey, I know I'm gonna be the guy outside of what Drake London and Kyle Pitts, and I'll throw Darnell Mooney in there too. That next spot is it's up for grabs. So like it's gonna be a lot of good stiff competition come July when these guys report and they start putting the pads on.
And of course, probably the most intriguing matchup, or the most intriguing battle rather, is that of strong safety. So again, it's where you sit today versus where we sit after training camp wraps. If you had to make the choice today for who is going to get the start at strong safety, or as we kind of expanded our definition, who's going to get the most snaps, who would that be for you?
Well, I mean, it is interesting you put it that way, T, because it's like every day I wake up and I'm like, maybe this is DeMarco Hellum's day, or maybe this is a Richie Grant day. It just goes back and forth. And like I feel like that's probably how it's going to break down in training camp, where we might see them alternate with the ones day to day or something like that. Similar a couple of years ago when it was like Matt Hennessy and Drew Dahlman alternating with the ones. And then we got to like the week before week one, and we're like, who's actually starting at center? And so it could be that type of situation with the strong safety. So just for today, I'll go with DeMarco Hellums. You ask me tomorrow, maybe I'll go with Richie Grant.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know, man. I like DeMarco Hellums but he kind of scares me when it comes to coverage. But I just like, he's kind of like that old school, like enforcer, like come down and knock you little stuff in the dirt. I ain't gonna say the term that I normally would say in that thing, but kind of be respectful.
Since we're going old school with the terms today.
Right. But yeah, I feel like DeMarco has a really good opportunity. I remember talking to him when he first came in as a rookie, and you just kind of it's a beautiful thing to watch, to see guys come in and people not really expect anything from them, and then they come out there and just perform when they get the opportunity, because Richie Grant had his different struggles, and once you saw him go in there, you're like, oh, that's why they drafted that cat later rounds of the NFL. So I feel like Hellum has a really good opportunity to do something, and like I said, contract years mean something, and I'll be interested to see if Richie Grant steps up, but my money is probably going to go on Hellums right now as of July 1st.
Yeah, I'm the same way. July 1st, I'm taking DeMarco, but I don't think that discredits what Richie Grant is right now. I definitely think that there are creative ways that you can still use Richie Grant and while also using DeMarco. I don't think that there's anything that we can say. I don't like the idea of just kind of being like, oh, if DeMarco's starting, then forget Richie Grant. I actually don't think that you have to be that way in scheme. I actually think that you can have Richie Grant be more of a role player and have more of a specified, whether, it's in the slot or in the box or whatever the case may be. I don't think that just because I'm saying DeMarco Hellums right now on July 1st, that doesn't mean that I'm also not saying here's a very specific role for Richie Grant too. I'm trying to appease everybody, but but I think that kind of works best to both of their strengths and skill sets. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens and what shakes out with that, because to me, that is the one position battle that is flying so far under the radar that not a lot of people are talking about, but I think could have immense impact through training camp and also at the very beginning of the season as well.
So let's talk about a breakout player on both sides of the ball in the deep dive. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. So when we think about the fact that it's kind of a sad day, so to speak, because we don't have the luxury of sports anymore, right? Meaning no playoffs. That's all a wrap for us. But sports is going to still sports in some way, shape, or form, which means that there's every opportunity for you to take advantage of being able to bet on said sports. So where would you do that? At FanDuel. And how do you do that? It's fanduel.com/lockedon, especially because we find ourselves still in the throes of the baseball season. Kind of, we've gotten to the midpoint and beyond. So with that in mind, this summer, you can be hooked up with a boost or bonus daily, all customers, all summer long. That's right. Something for every single one each and every day of this long, hot Atlanta summer. So again, what do you do? You go to fanduel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer, because FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So guys, the NFL Network and NFL.com analyst Bucky Brooks shared his all breakout team on offense recently. He chose Matthew Bergeron as one of the 11 players, but the lone Falcon to make the team. Brooks said, quote, "The athletic interior blocker is poised to shine in a revamped offense under new coordinator Zach Robinson that makes the most of his talents as a people mover at the point of attack. Bergeron's movement skills should lead to more space for running back Bijan Robinson on runs while providing sufficient protection for Kirk Cousins to attack from the pocket." So first off, Jarvis, did Bucky get it right with Bergeron as his choice for all breakout team on offense?
No, I can't agree with that. I mean, I love the pick, like, because anytime you picking going up front like that lets you know that man has done his homework, right? Because a lot of times people want to go with the sexy, wide receivers and running backs, which I'm probably about to get to in 1 second. So I'm gonna be that guy, right? But I feel like I totally understand what he's at, because just I don't think people understand like the type of season that Bergeron. When you think about a guy coming in and changing positions, he did not play guard until he got to the Senior Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about being thrust into a left guard spot, y'all remember that movie Before when it was Jalen Mayfield? You remember that? Do you remember what that would look like? You were a guy that played mostly tackle in college, right? So you just appreciate what it is, and I appreciate Bucky, but I have to go with my man Drake London. I feel like this dude is gonna have he's gonna eat this year. I'm not on even. I know this guy's gonna eat this year, because as long as Kirk stays healthy, I feel like he's gonna define that young man as much as possible. Because given what he had to work with at quarterback, he still almost had 1,000 yards receiving, right? So you got to think that with Kirk throwing him the rock, and being healthy and getting the necessary pass protection that he deserves, I feel like it's going to put him in a really good spot. And I feel like Drake is going to have a little coming out party this year.
Tori, what about you? Do you think that Bucky got it right with Bergeron, or is there someone else whom you would have selected from the Falcons to be on the all breakout team?
So when I think about like breakout, I think of like someone going from like in a box to out of a box. And to me, Matthew Bergeron was never in a box last year. I felt like Matthew Bergeron, I completely agree with Jarvis. Matthew Bergeron was somebody who came in and immediately, and I think Matthew Bergeron is, his trajectory and what he was able to do in his first year is very commendable. And I think that he kind of put himself as a breakout player last year. Like I didn't necessarily have a lot of huge lofty expectations for Matthew Bergeron coming in, just because I don't think I wanted to get burned because of what had happened at the left guard position, like in previous years, not just talking about Jalen Mayfield, but the revolving door at left guard for years of covering this team. So, right. So I truly didn't have too high of expectations. I was just like, if he can just do like the foundational stuff right, then that's good enough for me. And he ended up, I think, very much exceeding my expectations. So I already have kind of these like bigger expectations for Matthew Bergeron, which to me doesn't necessarily contend with like the what I consider to be breakout player. Breakout player is somebody who there is something fundamentally that changed and a new opportunity that presents itself from one year to the other. And having Kirk Cousins as a quarterback immediately changes the scope of exactly what Jarvis is saying. Someone like Drake London, someone like Kyle Pitts, someone like Darnell Mooney, like those three to me, I'm not picking. I guess I'll go with Kyle Pitts because for the same reason that what Jarvis is saying, but also the fact that you have a 100% healthy Kyle Pitts. And I think it was Raheem Morris who said this when I asked him about it, like at the beginning of OTAs, like a healthy Kyle Pitts is a dangerous Kyle Pitts. And it's somebody that the Falcons really, really need. We talked about like contract years for Richie Grant. Well, yes, the Falcons picked up Kyle Pitts, 5th-year option, but you have to look at what this year is for Kyle Pitts when you're kind of thinking about what type of contract is Kyle Pitts going to have once he's off of that 5th-year deal or 5th-year option. What kind of money are we talking for Kyle Pitts? And this is the year that if he can establish himself as a guy who can go out and get 1,000 receiving yards as a tight end and, score like double-digit touchdowns, let's just say, which is pretty lofty. I realize that's like extremely lofty considering what it's been the last, 3 years of Kyle Pitts and only, I think, having 7 touchdowns total. But the reason you got him, and I go back to this all the time, and I'm getting riled up, but like I go back to this all the time. Everybody said when this man was coming up in the draft that the reason why he was a top 5 draft pick was because of the mismatches he presents specifically in the red zone. That's what the Falcons need to capitalize on. That right there. I don't understand. I can't do like a Jonnu Smith jet sweep at the 2-yard line. Just throw the ball to Kyle. That's it. But I'm done. I need to breathe.
Woosah,
someone else. I'm gonna get in trouble. Stop me from talking.
Well, because I think Tori and Jarvis nailed it when it comes to other options, other candidates that are breakout. But let's talk about Matthew Bergeron. Unlike Tori, I was a little disappointed. I had expectations for Matthew Bergeron just because I thought the thing that he did the best in college was run block, and I thought the run blocking was a little disappointing, and I think that was a contributing factor to why the Falcons' run game wasn't quite as effective as I think a lot of people thought it would be last year as being like this top 5 unit or whatever. Not to blame it all on Matthew Bergeron, but I think that was a contributing factor to it. So I do feel like Bergeron has some potential to break out in that area just because we saw what, Dwayne Ledford could do from a guy in year 2 with Drew Dahlman a couple of years ago, where Drew Dahlman had a very quiet rookie season, working as the backup behind Matt Hennessy. And then you came through that second summer that we talked about where him and Hennessy were battling back and forth. But then when Dahlman emerged as a starter, you saw him put together a solid season for that. And that was a big jump from where he was as a rookie. And so if we could see a similar thing for Matthew Bergeron, and, as Tori mentioned and Jarvis mentioned, you're not starting from maybe as low a place as you were with Dahlman. That to me does potentially open a door for Bergeron to be this breakout guy where you go from a guy that was solid, but to a guy that's actually very good. And this year you kind of need him to be very good just because when you just look at the schedule and you look at some of these D tackles that the Falcons are going to face early in the season, like Cameron Hayward in week 1 and Jalen Carter in week 2 and Chris Jones in week 3, you kind of need Bergeron to kind of hit the ground running immediately as that sort of breakout candidate this year, just so the Falcons don't have to worry about those guys completely throwing wrenches into their offensive game plan in the month of September. So I do think Bergeron is a good candidate for a breakout candidate, but obviously I think there are plenty of options for breakout candidates because we've been talking about the Falcons offense breaking out for several years. And it's hey, everybody's
in a minute
because, this offense hasn't quite performed up to the level that I think a lot of us think it should be other than flashes here or there from various players.
Well, we'll talk about whether or not there is an all breakout defensive team member from the Falcons on that list in what's next. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is also brought to you by BetterHelp. So when you think about your health, and I think Jarvis mentioned it earlier, we talked about it actually ahead of the show, we are officially midway through 2024. And sometimes we look back at how well we've done or not done in the first half of the year. In particular, let's be honest, we live in a comparison culture. So people love to go on social media and kind of look at what others have done, or even compare it to the goals or resolutions they have for themselves that maybe they haven't met quite yet. So do you find yourself maybe getting caught up wishing that maybe your life looked like someone else's or a little bit different? Well, you got to be careful about that, because comparison is the thief of joy, and it's easy to envy other people's lives. It might look like they have it all together, but in reality, they probably don't have it any more together than you do. Therapy can actually help you on what you want instead of what others have, so you can start living your best life. If you're thinking of starting therapy, then give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. You just have to fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched up with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. That's BetterHelp.com/locked-on. Visit the site today to get 10% off your first month. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked-on. So the second half of your 2024 can look better than the first. Locked On Sports Today is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel and is programmed to bring you the biggest stories daily without all the noise. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Tori, I'm interested to see if you are as fired up about who maybe should have made the all-breakout defense team. Bucky Brooks did not have a Falcon on that team, but I was wondering if maybe there was a guy that you guys were looking at saying, hey, of those 11 players that Bucky Brooks picked for his all breakout defense team, that you want to see, or say, hey, that guy should have been on that list because I want to see him break out.
I mean, I can understand like why he didn't have like a Falcons guy on there. So for me, because I do think this defense, you have to get a little bit more like in the weeds of understanding this team to figure out like who exactly you want to be like this like breakout person. For me, it's Troy Anderson. We have not seen a 100% like Troy Anderson. Like
Jarvis's face story, just saying. That's your cosign.
But no, I like, so we haven't seen like Troy Anderson is someone who, in the same way that we were kind of talking about Matthew Bergeron, like people forget Troy Anderson hasn't been playing middle linebacker like at that often, like at this kind of level. And so I think for me, it's like you want to see kind of everything that's been done over the last 2 years, I guess, in the classroom per se. And then also the fact that he's 100% healthy. You want to be able to see the speed of which they have. The reason they got him was because of kind of the speed and the physicality and the violence of which they believe him to play with. So if he's slotting back into that starting lineup alongside Caden Ellis and Nate Landman becomes more of like a role player. I mean, I still think that we could see some 3 linebacker sets. I 100% believe that the Falcons will like try and do some creative things with the 3 of them. But Troy Anderson, this is a huge year for him. And in terms of breaking out, I think for you to reap the rewards of that specific draft pick and to kind of see fruit of that draft pick, I think this needs to be a big year for him in terms of staying healthy and also getting some production under his belt.
Yeah, and probably more than anything, Tori, healthy is the key word there. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say Troy Anderson just to see what Jarvis's reaction to that was going to be. But, for another player, Arnold Ebiketie. And I can understand why Bucky didn't pick any Falcons pass rushers because, Falcons pass rushers don't break out based off of the last 20 years that we've seen. So, hopefully Arnold Ebiketie will sort of buck that trend and have that sort of breakout season as the sort of alpha at least in the edge room. And so we can, talk about, hey, he's a trendsetter because he's the first one, I guess, since Vic Beasley that has, had a breakout year. And we saw that didn't last too long after that. So maybe that's a conversation we'll have a year from now. But first, you have to have the initial breakout year so we can talk about whether or not you will sustain it long term. So I do think there are plenty of young players on this defense that the Falcons have drafted over the last couple of years that they're counting on to sort of emerge this season. Troy Anderson's one. I think Arnold Ebiketie's another, and I'm sure Jarvis can probably come up with another group of names that are also
Troy Anderson.
But we'll see if he gets into his Troy Anderson rant because he looks like he's got something to say.
No, I'm not going to go with Troy Anderson. I'm going to let you all have that one. So I've expressed on this show plenty of times how I feel about Mr. Anderson. So and I become a big fan of Nate Landman. I'll just leave it at that. All right. So for me, I feel it has to be Arnold Ebiketie. Here's why. Because if you look at some of his pass rush reps from last year, you see that he got a lot of wins. He got a lot of wins, but he wasn't able to get home for whatever reason, right? The quarterback gets guy lose contained on the opposite side of him. They roll away from him, and he, sitting there chasing and not, being really upset that he couldn't get to the quarterback, right? So I feel like that the development from a technique standpoint, being able to know how to attack a guy, on third and long, and having that repertoire, or being able to go to certain moves in certain times because he knows that he's been working that edge all game. Then he knows that, hey, it's third and long in the fourth quarter. Hey, how about I do this? Let me go fake outside and then spin back inside, or give him an in and out and go back outside. So it's just certain things that comes with learning how to pass rush. It's not necessarily, hey, I got these moves, I'm about to win. Nah, that's part of it, but it's about when to implement certain things, and I feel like he has that. So I feel like this is Arnold Ebiketie's year to have a really big season, because it's all about just finishing, right? Finishing it, because you can beat the man in front of you. That's the hardest part right there. It's just all about things working out in your favor, where the ball holding too long, getting better coverage in the backfield, so he can hold on to that quarterback, hold on to that football, or he can pat one more time that you can get there and put him on his back, versus it's just people just saying, oh man, the dude only had 6 sacks. What is he doing? But just look at the games and look at what he's been doing. He's been winning. It's just a matter of him getting home and finishing.
We will see the start of that progress or process in about 3 weeks with training camp. And of course, just in 10 Sundays, we'll really get to see not only who's that breakout player potentially on offense or defense, but also that player who ultimately is that guy who, if the season started today, is going to be that projected starter, or like we said earlier, gets a lot of snaps. That's where you see it really starting to show itself in training camp. Thanks for stopping by the Atlanta Football Party. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, we're free and available wherever you download your podcasts. We'll see you tomorrow on the Atlanta Football Party, the Dogs edition.